It's that time again, MION unboxing. I have 5 records to show you today. There's some great stuff in here, so do not go anywhere. Okay, I'm splitting this unboxing into 2 separate videos because each of them has a little bit of a theme. This is part 1, and look for part 2 to drop sometime next week. This video is sponsored by MION Records, where as always, you'll save 10% on each and every record and each and every purchase that you make at mion.tokyo by using promo code SPINZ at checkout. All right, I'm excited to get into this video, so let's jump right in. All right, let's kick this video off right with Charles Mingus's 1956 album, Pithecanthropus Erectus, released on the Atlantic label. This is a 1971 Japanese pressing. There is the inner sleeve, and there is your label. The lineup on this album includes some of my all-time favorites like Jackie McLean on sax and Mal Waldron on piano. What I love about Charles Mingus is that he is such a fantastic composer and his compositions are so cinematic. Mingus is very much a storyteller, which is why for me, any number of Mingus albums could easily be a soundtrack to a film from the 50s or the 60s starring people like James Dean or Paul Newman or Marlon Brando. And this record is certainly no exception. It is just awesome. I sort of look at it as if you were going to categorize an artist's catalog into 3 stacks. 1, the most accessible stuff, and then maybe a little more challenging, and then the most challenging stuff. I would put this album in Mingus's second group. I think a great place to get started with Charles Mingus's work, and where I think a lot of people do get started, is with, say, Mingus a fantastic album. Mingus, another killer album, very accessible, a great place to get started with the work of Mingus. And Jazz Portraits, also known as Mingus in Wonderland, another fantastic place to enter into the music of Mingus. A great place to start for anybody. But I also think that this record falls into that second category. So if you're someone that has some experience with Mingus, but maybe you haven't explored things like Pithecanthropus Erectus, or this next album, Mingus's 1957 album put out by Atlantic, which is the very next year. This is The Clown, and this is a 1976 Japanese pressing, your Atlantic label. And this features Charles Mingus' first blues on record, a tune called Blue Sea, which is really, really cool and really, really Mingus. A lot of Mingus's work is informed by prejudice and hate and persecution, and in a lot of ways, this is kind of the culmination that personifies maybe Mingus's sadness and rejection and loathing growing up in that reality. And it's kind of why his work as a whole is very raw and emotional and just authentic. Also, I know Ornette Coleman, Coltrane, Dolphy, Cecil Taylor get most of the love when it comes to innovating the avant-garde. But I really credit Mingus as a precursor to that movement, if you want to call it that. Musically, he has one foot firmly planted in the world of bop and even swing, but the other foot points forward toward the avant-garde and even free jazz. I can highly recommend both of these albums if you want to further your exploration into the world of Charles Mingus and his music, or if you just love fantastic, moody, swinging music that stands for something greater. All right, so speaking of Ornette Coleman, this is Ornette's debut album, Something Else, which precedes his breakout album by 1 year, The Shape of Jazz to Come. This was released in 1958 on the Contemporary label, and this is a 1975 Japanese pressing. The inner insert, there's your label. And the first thing I think of when I hear this album and Ornette's playing is Charlie Parker on steroids. And you can say that about a lot of saxophone players or just jazz musicians in general, particularly early in their careers. I mean, you could say the same thing about Coltrane. With titans like Bird and Train, there's always going to be a generation of players coming up that are really inspired by these guys. And early on, they can tend to sound a little bit derivative, but the greats will always show glimpses of originality and greatness, even early on, and that is certainly how I feel about Ornette Coleman. This is really a bluesy traditional bop album that absolutely swings. It features Don Cherry on cornet and the prolific and great Billy Higgins on drums. And as if it wasn't enough for Billy to play hundreds of Blue Note sessions, he also played a ton of sessions on other labels. Higgins was just a machine, Smiling Billy, as they used to call him. And Ornette is someone that I'm ashamed to say that I kind of ignored for a while. I mean, and which is strange for me because I love avant-garde jazz music. I'm very familiar with Eric Dolphy and John Coltrane and Cecil Taylor, but for some reason, Ornette was it took me a while to come around on Ornette, which isn't a bad thing now because in 2024, I get to begin to really familiarize myself with his music. So that's exciting and cool. I don't know if Ornette gets his props just in terms of how good of a player he is. He's very, very good, one of the best. And his early music, his first few albums are very accessible. I think much more accessible than people think. I think anyone that loves jazz will love this album. It's really not that challenging, especially not as challenging as his later stuff. There's sort of this narrative that Ornette Coleman's music is so advanced and, again, inaccessible, and it's just not true for his early stuff. His early stuff's very, very, very listenable, even for the average jazz enthusiast. This is a very accessible album, and I feel like maybe even a gateway album. I think Ornette's first maybe 3 albums can easily be a gateway for you if you're looking to explore the world of avant-garde a little more and maybe even start getting into free jazz. I think these are 3 fantastic albums that will get you there, as well as just 3 amazing hard bop swinging albums. All right, this is one of the coolest bluesy jazz albums you will ever hear. Cal Tjader's Jazz at the Blackhawk. This was originally released on Fantasy in 1957. This is the 1990 Original Jazz Classics pressing, and Cal Tjader, in my opinion, is a name that does not come up enough. Many of his albums are top-notch. This live offering is no exception. It sounds fantastic. The music is beautiful and just second to none. The playing is just top-notch, and Cal played with a lot of top-notch musicians, including George Shearing and Dave Brubeck. Tjader is on the short list of jazz vibraphonists, and his playing really elevates this album. He is every bit as good as Milt Jackson on this album. So if you're a fan of Milt's, you will probably love this recording. Everyone is awesome on here, especially, very notably, is Vince Guaraldi on piano. And we all know Vince Guaraldi from Charlie Brown and the Peanuts shows, but he is a spectacular piano player and he kills on this session. It's just a fun, swinging album that I bet will have you seeking out more Cal Tjader after you hear it. All right, last but certainly not least, we have Ron Carter. This is all blues, originally released on the CTI label in 1974. This is a 1979 Japanese pressing. This album features Joe Henderson on tenor, and he just kills on this album. And Ron Carter is someone that I've really been getting into his recordings more recently. You might recognize that title from the Miles Davis Kind of Blue album, and there is an excellent arrangement of that tune on here that just sounds beautiful. Joe Henderson blows his head off on this track. If you don't listen to another thing I tell you in this video, just promise me you'll check out that tune. And hang until the end because there are some really nice surprises that happen in that track. It's just, the arrangement is very, very cool. There's a lot of great moments on this album. Everyone is in top form. I really love the track Light Blue, just a beautiful song that features Roland Hanna's piano, who again elevates this record so much. And Ron Carter always adds a touch of the unusual in my mind. He's never boring. He's never mediocre. I just love Ron Carter. As always, I want to thank MION for sponsoring this unboxing. Don't forget to check out part 2 next week, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. There are going to be some super bangers in that one. Don't forget to save 10% on mion.tokyo with promo code SPINZ at checkout. And keep the emails coming. I really appreciate them. I mean, I love seeing what you guys are picking up. I've seen some great stuff. Makes me feel good that you guys are finding some deals out there. And yeah, it makes it all worth it. So if you do grab some records at MION, you can find my email on my homepage and just send me some pics. I would love to see them. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.